like music a lot. Sometimes when I hear a song, I think that would fit this sermon, or that would fit this person, or that would fit a certain situation. If Hagar had a theme song, it probably Linda Ronstadt's #1 song from 1975, which was written by the Everly Brothers. I've been cheated, I've been mistreated, when will I be loved? I've been pushed down, I've been pushed around, when will I be loved? I've been made blue, I've been lied to, when will I be loved? I've been cheated, been mistreated, when will I be loved? When will I be loved? Tell me, when will I be loved? Now it doesn't quite fit Hagar, because Linda Ronstadt and the Everly Brothers are probably talking about a lover who left them. In Hagar's situation, she had no power. She was abused and she had no power. But what she knew was being treated like less than a whole person. When we hear the story of Abraham and Sarah, we often hear it from the dominant narrative. We all know the great story of Sarah and Abraham waiting for this child. And we hear it only from Abraham and Sarah's perspective. We hear about Isaac. Hagar and Ishmael are kind of pushed aside as the mistake that was made. We forget if we only hear a story from the dominant narrative, we miss the whole picture. We know that's true in American history. If we only hear the story of the Native American situation based on white people, we miss a lot of the story. If we only hear about the women's suffrage movement from the point of white males, we miss a lot of the story. The same is true in this situation, the story of Hagar. If you notice, we skipped a lot of the story. We heard a lot of words today, but we went from chapter 16 all the way to 25 in Genesis with various verses. And we know the story. Abraham and Sarah were promised something, and they waited, and in between times they tried to take the situation into their own hands. What we know about Sarah is she was a woman, and she had no power, she had no status. She could not own anything, she had no voice. What made it even worse for her was she was a foreigner. She was from Egypt, and she had never gone back home again. And she was a slave. She was bought by Abraham and Sarah and was brought to this new land. And in that place, she was a mistress to Sarah, and she had to do whatever she was told to do. She had no voice. She couldn't go when she wanted to. She couldn't sleep when she wanted to. She did whatever she was told by her masters. And her story begins with a promise that we hear in the Bible, but it's not her promise. Because she's a woman, she's a foreigner, and she's a slave. It's a promise made to Abraham, that he'll be a father of great nations, that he'll be the one from whom the Savior will eventually come. We know this story so well, but we forget that she was a casualty. She was a casualty in the drama. Because Abraham and Sarah get this promise and they can't wait, right? This is going to happen. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and nothing happens, so they decide, I know what we'll do. You're able in that culture to have a child with one of your slaves and have them be your heir. Once again, Abraham and Sarah make the decision. Hagar has no voice in it. So they hand her over to bear this child. This is Hagar's story. This is how Ishmael came to be, from a woman who had no voice. It seems that throughout human history, humans have been incredible. We do incredible things for one another. We know those stories from our own congregation. But we also have been very cruel throughout human history. We have treated people like property and objects. In fact, if you look from the beginning of history until now, more people have been enslaved than have been free. Think about that for a minute. If you go back to human history, more people have been enslaved than have been free from the beginning of time. And this is true throughout history. We know it's so true in the day of Abraham and Sarah. The majority of people owned other people, and they were no exception. What we know, too, is that when people are made to be slaves, they lose so much. What they hold out for is hope that it'll be better for the next generation. In the world today, there are 30 million slaves throughout the world. Almost 100,000 of them are in the United States. The name Hagar means fugitive or immigrant. The one who flees, the one who who's cast out, the one who has to leave. The story of Hagar reminds us of the human condition, and I know this might sound like a downer today, but we know it's so true in the world. And I think it's important to remember the Hagar story so we don't forget, for those of us who celebrate freedom, especially this week, what it means for those who long for it, who are treated like a means to an end instead of like a human being. We learn a lot from Hagar. We learn about perseverance and also taking a voice when we can, because we heard it in 16. She is so mistreated by Sarah once she conceives. She is spit on, she is slapped, and she is treated so poorly, and Sarah blames Hagar for flaunting her pregnancy, that she flees. She runs away. And notice what Abraham says when Sarah complains about it. He says, do with her what she wants. She's your property. So she flees in the night, and she meets this holy person, this angel, this messenger from God, who ministers to her when she is the most alone. Pregnant, have run away, knowing that she could be killed if she goes back again. We learn from Hagar that she will do anything to make a better life for herself and for her child, no matter what that means. We learn that in the darkest hour, she was not expecting to experience God. She didn't go in the wilderness hoping for a holy spiritual moment. She went there because she'd given up. And then when they cast her out after Ishmael is born, she is convinced they will both die. What does Abraham send her with? A little thing of water and a slice of bread. And when it seems like all hope is gone, she distances herself from her child because she cannot stand his tears, because it seems like the end is near. And once again, this holy person, this messenger, comes to her. What we find is God does not abandon us in the darkest moments. Even when we are sent out, even when others say we are not worthy, even when they say we are not a beloved child of God, God ministers to us and comes to us. We can't help but think about people like Harriet Tubman, who was born into slavery and found her way out, and didn't just celebrate that, but went and brought others out of slavery. She became a great leader during the Civil War. She was instrumental in pushing for abolishing slavery. We can't help think about people like Nelson Mandela, who were in prison for 26 years and eventually was elected president of South Africa. We can't help but think about people like Oprah Winfrey, who was born in poverty, gave birth to a child when she was just 14, lost that child, and we know the person she is today, one of the most powerful women in our country. We can't help but think about what it took in those darkest moments for each of those individuals, that they found they did not walk alone, that they found that God did not abandon them, even though it had to feel like it a lot of the time. Louis Pasteur said, one doesn't ask of one who suffers, what is your country, what is your religion? You suffer. That is enough for me. You belong to me, and I shall help you. Words by Jason Buckley. We are at war. Life is a battle. Every day we fight for joy, peace, and love. And then he goes on to say, God who sees. You see me in my despair.